Good afternoon. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. I am Porter Larson, filling in for one Spence Checketts on this Wednesday afternoon alongside that gal there. She is one Sarah Todd at NBA Sarah of the Deseret News. We're going to be taking you through it, the NBA homestretch, the Jazz latest. We'll get to some NCAA tournament talk, of course, and we'll go from there. Some RSL, Real Salt Lake soccer, of course, a good start for Pablo and co. Some NBA off-the-court storylines that we'll get to as well. But looking forward to getting to all of it with one Sarah Todd, who makes her, although she's been on this station many a time, making her debut in the air chair. What's up, Sarah?
Yeah, my first time in this incredibly important seat that so many legends have sat in. How much flattery should I use here at the top?
All of it.
When talking about Spence, Sean O'Connell, the great Bill Riley.
Who will be back on the airwaves this week, Friday edition of the OC show with Bill, the voice of the Utes, 3-time Sportscaster of the Year, and of course, 2-time Sports Writer of the Year here.
2-time, baby.
2-time?
2-time? I promise that filling in today and tomorrow should be gloriously mediocre, and I'm going to do my absolute best.
And I promise you nothing. You get no promises from me.
Hey, I was listening yesterday in preparation, obviously.
Yes.
I've never had an Uncrustable.
What?
Never.
How?
Just, first of all, they freak me out. Because I don't understand how a sandwich can be frozen or refrigerated and not be soggy.
Right.
So I just have never gone near one.
Interesting. A lot of preservatives, I assume, helps in that regard. It is just like a sugar bomb of a sandwich. But as someone who grew up on PB&J, PB and honey, PB and whatever you want to throw on there,
yeah.
I'm a big Uncrustables guy. Now, we're not sponsored by Smuckers, so I'll just, any sort of peanut butter simple combination on some bread is, as the kids would say, Sarah, it slaps.
It does slap. I do love a PB&J.
As I mentioned, this is Sarah's first time in the hosting chair. We appreciate her for taking the time with me today and tomorrow. So why don't we start there, Sarah Todd, on one Sarah Todd. We know you. Listeners of the show know you. They know your sports coverage. But since you're here for several hours today, let's maybe introduce the listeners to Sarah a little bit deeper, a little bit more. We'll put you on the spot here. Your ability to cover the sport, ability to cover the Jazz, I think, is awesome because you've been throughout a multitude of markets. You've been at stops that have winning teams, losing teams, championship teams, teams that are in the process of tanking and whatnot. Let's just get the rundown of your life in sports media and how it has landed right here in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it started. I started covering the NBA in the Bay Area. I'm from California originally, and so, but did not grow up a Warriors fan. I think that a lot of people assume that I was, being close to the Bay Area or in the Bay Area.
Where was your cheering fandom? Just curious.
It was nowhere. I was a Players fan because I was close to Sacramento also, and I hated Mike Bibby, hated Chris Webber. I definitely wasn't going to be an LA fan. The Warriors were bad. And so I followed players across the league. And my brother had a Michael Jordan poster on his wall when I was really young. He's 11 years older than me. And so that was really my introduction. It was just like, oh, you can put one player on your wall and be a fan of that and not have to give your fandom or your loyalty to a certain team. And then that just led to me being a hoops junkie forever for all of my life. And so then covering the NBA was always the goal, and kind of set out with intentions, went to journalism school with the intention of covering the NBA. And so then that started out with me covering the Warriors. Started late 2012, did that through the 2015 championship. From there, went to Philadelphia, covered the Sixers until the end of the 2018-19 season. And then in December of 2019, landed here in Utah to cover the Jazz.
It's been a fun journey to follow, and glad to have you here in Salt Lake City. Now, since you've been in Utah as a California gal, how have you enjoyed your time here? You've settled down. You've started a little family.
Settled down. I literally settled down. I've gotten married. I have a stepkid now. I'm a changed woman.
How have you enjoyed Utah and its I guess I'll say uniquities, particular listen, Spence and I have talked about this quite a bit recently, because I think that thanks to reality TV, especially lately, there's a specific viewpoint of Utah that isn't exactly what you get if you just live here day to day. So what is that like for you? How have you enjoyed it, and how have you realized that it's maybe not exactly the secret lives of housewives or whatever the hell it is?
I mean, I'm lucky, I guess, because I haven't watched any of those shows, so I don't even know what unique perspective is being sent out by the Secret Wives of Mormon Lives or Housewives of Salt Lake City. I have no idea. So
you didn't watch Sister Wives either back in the day on TLC?
I did not.
Fine.
You know what's funny is that my group chat with my 6 best friends from back home in California, that group chat has been named Sister Wives since way before I moved to Utah.
Oh, interesting.
And so now that I live in Utah and I'm getting texts from Sister Wives, if anybody's standing over my shoulder and sees it, they probably have a completely different thought process than they did when I was in Philadelphia texting that group.
Your time in Philly has, I think, uniquely prepared you for the process that the Jazz are currently undergoing.
For watching bad basketball?
Yes.
Yeah.
And covering it as well.
Yeah.
How have the last 4 years, how have you made the last 4 years palatable, and how was the Philly a little bit of preparation for that?
Yeah, I think when we started this process in Utah, I say process not with as a proper noun here. I knew that there was going to be an end goal, right? I think it's really hard for fans to know that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. Like, when is this going to end? When can we expect for things to get better? It's really hard to see that when you're 2, 3, 4 years into it. And there are certain teams around the league. I mentioned this with Sean before we came into the show today. If you look at the Wizards or the Hornets or the Kings, I don't have answers for those teams. For fans of those teams, I don't have, in a few years, you'll be able to see something good. It's going to be nice. Don't worry, this is all going to be worth it. Because, bad ownership, mismanagement, horrible front office decisions, like, you can't really get around that. And if it lasts years and years and decades, then maybe there is no light for you to hope for. But for these teams like the Jazz, who have had, historically either middling or very good seasons for many, 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 many years, when they decide to tear it all down and rebuild, they're always thinking that there is this light at the end of the tunnel. And looking at the draft assets, the protections on those picks and everything, it looked like it was always going to be about a 3 to 5 year process. And so I think knowing that there was going to be an end goal helps. But also, I'll watch any basketball. I can cover anything. That if I'll cover a JV team at a junior high in a rural area, I don't care. I love basketball no matter what. And so even if it's bad, I think that you have to kind of embrace the hilarity of some of the bad things, right? Like, sometimes when Cody Williams is just airballing threes and the other team is on a 20-0 run, that you just have to laugh at how bad it is sometimes. And I think, that's good life advice. Just laugh through the hard times.
And as you mentioned, yeah, you can get through the hard times a little bit easier when there's some structure there. There's some sort of, we can call it light at the end of the tunnel. We can call it a plan, whatever it may be. It may be tough to explain that to a fan of the Washington Wizards, right? It may be tough to explain that to a fan of the Sacramento Kings, who, regardless of the talent they bring in, it just seems like there's no cohesion. There's nothing in front of them. With this Jazz team, I do feel it's a little bit different. Now, we are extending into 3-4 years of this, which is tough to stomach, but it's a team with talent on the roster and a bunch of assets over the next few years to build around that. And I think that should be pretty exciting for Jazz fans and part of the conversation Sarah and I will get to throughout the afternoon. As we mentioned on the show today, Kevin Reynolds, who is now a competitor of Sarah Todd in the beat room. I know there's a lot of, you're working together, but sometimes you're working against each other in the deadline and whatnot. So now a new arch rival of Sarah Todd, Kevin Reynolds, will stop by. We'll talk to Ben Golliver, some more hoops there. And as I mentioned, in about the 3:30 time frame, we are going to hear for the first time from Morgan Scalley's staff. It is spring football up on the hill at the University of Utah. And Sharif Shah, Colton Swan, the defensive coordinator, Kevin McGivern, the offensive coordinator, Mark Atuaya, the running backs coach and assistant head coach for the University of Utah football. For the first time in spring, we will hear from each of those guys and more on the drive, this time hosted by myself, Porter Larson, and that, Sarah Todd. First, an opening segment brought to you each and every day by our friends at Prize Picks. Shoot your shot on Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right. Prize Picks is now giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up today and play your first $5. Prize Picks makes every dunk, every dime, and every board that much more exciting, so don't miss a chance to get started on America's #1 app for sports picks. It is Prize Picks. Looking forward to this, Sarah. One segment down, several hours to go. All good in there?
Excellent. We're doing excellent in here.
We're really doing it, Sarah. We're doing this
really
thing.
Doing it.
Back on the other side, it's Kevin Reynolds of the Salt Lake Tribune, the newest Jazz beat writer. He joins the program on the other side right here on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back. Drive Time on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. It is Utah's number one sports talk. I am Porter Larson. Sarah Todd across from me, sitting across the glass. We're filling in for Spence Checketts. Halfway through your work week, one day closer to the weekend. Talking some NBA hoops, some NCAA tourney, some spring football. We'll get to all of that as the show progresses along. And our next guest, we'll get to a little bit of, well, maybe all of that, Kevin Reynolds, because he is kind of sidestepping between two jobs, one of them covering college sports here in the market, and now the newest beat writer for the Utah Jazz. Kev, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Sorry. Take two. Kev, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
There he is. We're doing well. Glad to have you on the program, as always. I should have asked Sarah what she wanted to go with the music theme today. The Rolling Stones was an easy one to come in with, but
You should have asked me.
I apologize. I should have. Doing double duty in here, and I just ran with the Stones. But Kev, to put you on the spot, what should we have come in with for Kevin Reynolds' walk-up song?
I'm not a big Rolling Stones guy,
What
to be honest.
What?
But I'm malleable. I can work with anything. It's fine with me. I don't really care.
I may have to examine that a little bit more. Not a big Rolling Stones guy. What? You don't like Led Zeppelin either?
I just didn't grow up with any of it. My dad was a Bruce Springsteen fan. Not that I'm like a big Bruce Springsteen fan, but that's kind of what I grew up listening to, but that was about it.
I want to get into this. Kevin,
Yes.
what music do you like?
I'm not a huge music guy.
Not a huge music guy is an incredibly horrible take.
It's an awful take, and it's like the one thing that I always say, like, I have to work on, but I just really don't have any music preference. I mean, it's not like I dislike music. I just don't have a go-to,
Okay. Well, we'll have to maybe examine that a little bit more. We'll get into Sarah and I music takes as we go along. But hey, Kev, you are, as I mentioned, kind of on the fence between a couple of gigs right now as you transition from covering college sports here in the market to covering the NBA and the Utah Jazz in specific. Let's start on the college side and on the college hoop side. A bunch of programs in a whole bunch of different positions in the state of Utah. We'll start with BYU, since they made an NCAA tournament appearance in their early exit, if you consider it that. A shorthanded roster for much of the season, but still a little bit underwhelming when you look at what Kevin Young had coming in and where they finished. How did you consume BYU season and how it ended in that matchup with Texas?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think everybody thought with A.J. DeBonza coming in, how many times does BYU get the best player in the country, a potential number one NBA draft pick? Never, and it might never happen again. And so every time you have a guy like that on your roster, you have to maximize it, and I think you have to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, and they didn't. And they actually don't even get further than they did last year, getting to the Sweet 16 with Jaeger and some other guys, Richie Saunders too. But for that reason, I think you kind of have to consider this season a disappointment, or at least, I don't know if I would call it, a wasted season. I don't think that's necessarily right overall, because the investment that you make in AJ is more than just, from a BYU perspective, more than just about the NCAA tournament, playing in Las Vegas and Madison Square Garden and Boston and, playing a very national schedule and being on College game day against Kansas. Like, in terms of like the money, I think you get more than $5 million, $7 million, whatever they paid AJ DeBonza this year. They definitely made it back in terms of how much publicity they got and jersey sales and ticket sales. But in terms of the basketball product, which is what I think fans actually care about, what BYU fans actually care about at the end of the day, is NCAA tournament wins and making a deep run. That part was obviously, a waste in that aspect. And I think it's also disappointing because, yes, there were injuries. yes, Richie Saunders was not there, and that's a huge blow. How do you replace 18 points a game? But at the same time, like, one injury should maybe not equate to no NCAA tournament wins. You know, I think you can definitely say, hey, maybe Final Four's off the table once Richie Saunders is out, but the roster, I think, should have been able to get at least past an 11 seed, maybe even get to a Sweet 16. I mean, that was what they were talking about before as they went into the NCAA tournament, and they didn't get there. So for that reason, I say, you know, it's back to the drawing board and definitely a very big disappointment in Provo.
As they get back to the drawing board, though, does something like this, where you've had, 2 years now of kind of early exits, especially the most recent year, like we're talking about right now, with AJ not being able to even get a tournament win, does this start to hurt recruiting? And I know that, like, nowadays, so much of the NIL money is actually part of the recruiting process. But, I mean, I have to imagine that if good players around the country are looking at BYU and there was excitement with Kevin Young being the coach, now they see that it's a team that's not going to go very far. Is there a worry about that?
You know, I don't think so, because I think a lot of the reason why, at least from a player perspective, why AJ DeBonza signed up for BYU, yeah, I mean, you could talk about the tournament. I know he's talked about how he wanted to win a national championship at BYU, and obviously that didn't happen. But a big reason why these guys have talked about committing to BYU is because of their NBA future. And I think in that respect, you know, Kevin Young has done a very good job. Yegor Demon, he goes to the Nets. He's an 8 overall pick, much higher than I think a lot of people projected him, throughout the season. So, and he was very successful in his first year in Brooklyn. AJ DeBonza, I'd imagine, is going to be a good NBA player. Definitely will be a high draft pick in the top 3, if not, 1 or 2. And so in that regard, it was incredibly successful for those guys. And I think, when you're talking about recruiting, I think you can point to a lot of that development on the NBA side and say, listen, whatever happens in terms of the NCAA tournament, you yourself will be taken care of. And Bruce Branch comes in, another potential lottery guy for BYU. And the recruiting, I just don't think is the problem right now at all. I think Kevin Young is recruiting at maybe at the highest level that BYU's ever seen in any sport. So I'm not too worried about that if I was a BYU fan. But if you were a BYU fan, I think the thing you would be worried about is, how does this actually benefit, BYU, the basketball program itself, in terms of making NCAA tournament runs? Can it translate to that? And I think the roster construction around whoever the top guy is at BYU in a given year that Kevin Young likes and recruits, can you build a roster around them that equates to more than a Sweet 16, more than obviously a first-round exit?
And it goes without mentioning that Kevin Young's still very new at this level, right? It's a different ball game, and there is some grace that you get when you're a new head coach, even considering that, you got to kind of consider this year a little bit underwhelming in Provo, at least with how it finished. And again, the injury's a part of that conversation. Now, on the other side, at the University of Utah, Alex Jensen, his first full year at the helm for the Utes. I would say, although the expectations were not anywhere near as high, just when you look at the roster, when you look at what he's dealing with, still, I think, a little bit underwhelming with a lot of folks here in the market. Is that how you saw it? Or for a guy making his first debut, is there kind of just a allotment given to him in year one?
I'm kind of seeing it with you. I think there's part of me that says no one expected him to come in and contend for a Big 12 championship. No one expected him to make an NCAA tournament in year one. But to be basically at the dead last, 15, 14, 16 out of 16 teams in the Big 12 for basically much of the year, being in that bottom half of the league, like that, just wasn't very competitive. And I think Utah, even under Craig Smith, was competitive. You look at, but obviously Craig Smith did not get the chance to see BYU twice in his year because he got fired before they went to Provo. But he did beat BYU at home with a very good BYU team last year. And so, they did have wins. They were competitive. This year, there were moments, but it just didn't translate to very many wins. And I think you look at it also going forward is how much of this roster that Utah had this year can you really rely on going forward? Or are you going to have to kind of blow it all up and figure it out? But the more impactful things, I think, more so than just this year, are the structural foundational elements of like what he has to work with going forward. Like how much investment is there going to be? I know the private equity deal has promised to put in millions of dollars to the university and theoretically help football, help basketball compete, but they still need to see it in practice, and how much what is the caliber of guy that Alex Jensen can work with? What can he get, particularly when he's going in the Big 12, where all these programs are really well resourced. Arizona is extremely well resourced. BYU down the street, extremely well resourced. And then you even look at some of the other teams like Houston, Iowa State. Like, this is a really hard league, almost an impossible league to win if you don't actually have the money to recruit. And I think that's the biggest question, is like when or if Utah is going to go all in on basketball, because if not, I just think there's a ceiling on any team in the Big 12 in terms of how competitive you can be if you don't show the commitment to be that.
Up in Logan, we got another tournament appearance under another head coach for the Aggies. It's this time, a guy that's taken his a job at Cincinnati, his alma mater. And for the Utah State Aggies, despite another tournament run and a Mountain West title and a whole bunch of other regular season accolades, they are looking for another head coach. Kevin, how is this cycle continuing? How is it really? It's not sustainable, but for some reason in Logan, it has been. Despite all of the turnover, they just continue to win and continue to make tournament appearances. And again, that one over the pandemic where they would have made a tournament appearance with Sam Merrill. We'll talk a little bit about Sam Merrill a little bit later in the show. But what's going on in Logan, and how do they continue this type of basketball, that environment, that atmosphere, with the constant overturn of head coaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right. Like, it's like every single year you just don't think this is the fourth head coach. Now there'll be 5 head coaches in 7 years. And every time it's like, no way they can keep this up. No way they can go back to the NCAA tournament again consecutively, like not even the drop-off. And yet every single time it does happen. And I mean, I'll say this, like, I think Utah State has a fantastic fan base. I think it's the best place to go see a college basketball game in this state, compared to the Marriott Center and the Huntsman Center and a bunch of others. But that being said, though, like, I think this is probably the most concerning departure out of the last, Craig Smith, Ryan Odom, Danny Sprinkle, go through the list. Like, this one's the toughest, because Calhoun was a guy who, like, when I talked to him a year ago, kind of around the NCAA tournament, he said that he felt like he could win a national championship at Utah State. And I mean, yeah, that was obviously very ambitious, but it did have the feeling that this was a guy who felt like maybe he would stay, maybe he'd be comfortable staying. And also maybe he felt like he had the resources to do it. But this year, I think you just look at it, and every year that SEC, Big 10, Big 12 teams, these finances compound year over year. The television dollars compound year over year. And the difference between a Mountain West team and the elite level of the sport, I feel like just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And to the point where this year, Utah State won 28 games, regular season title, a conference title in the tournament, a conference tournament title, and still only got a 9 seed. And it's like, where do you go? Like, what is the, if you're a 9 seed, like, you're going to have to play a 1 seed in round 2. You're really never going to get to the Sweet 16. And it's like really impossible. They played a really good game against Arizona, and they got out-rebounded by 28. Like, the level of athlete is extremely different, and it's only getting worse. Like, as these finances look different. I mean, you look at a school like Florida spent $14 million to win a championship last year just on its staff and its basketball program, not even the NIL money. And you look at a school like really like Kentucky and all these other schools that are spending $7-9 million. North Carolina's increased its support staff budget by 150% since like the television dollars and realignment and NIL kicked in. And Utah State gave Calhoun under $1 million his first year to build out his assistant coaching pool. And it's like, it's not just about the money, or it's not just about NIL. It's about like a nutrition plan, and it's about a support staff to develop your own players. And Calhoun even said it, like the difference in athlete over the last couple of years between a mid-major and a high major team the gap has really widened, and now you're not seeing as many runs from 9 seeds and 11 seeds outside of Texas, which is not a Cinderella at all. It's an SEC school that just lost a lot of games throughout the year. So I think that's a concern, and it's like, how do you bridge that divide? I'm not really sure. And Calhoun didn't really seem to be very sure himself. Even in his comments today of like when he's getting introduced to Cincinnati, he's talking about like, I don't know what you want to do. Like if you're a 9 seed, I don't know what you can do as a mid-major to make a run. And so whoever the next coach is going to have to answer these questions. And I don't think it's over. Like, I don't think it's an impossible task, but things have to drastically change, I'd say, particularly from a financial commitment from schools that kind of just want to be all in on basketball at the mid-major level to compete and have a serious chance at making a deep run.
God, that is depressing.
I thought his comments were pretty depressing after he lost. I thought it kind of struck me as a coach just really looking at the reality of the situation, and then he leaves. Like he left before the plane even landed. So it was I think it's tough, but Utah State has. I will continue to say Utah State has just the best home court environment, I would say, in the entire state.
Well, from one depressing situation to another, how has the transition been from covering all of that to covering the Jazz?
Definitely. It's so weird because, you come from college where, all these teams are trying to maximize every last win and ounce out of, A.J. DeBonza's 1 year, and, Utah State puts together a roster. And then it's, the Jazz, which is a completely different scenario where they're on year 4 of this. But I guess there's light at the end of the tunnel, so that's a positive. Next year, should be better. But, yeah, definitely – it's like a 180 in a lot of ways covering college to the NBA, or at least the Jazz situation right now.
I have been loving having a front row seat to Kevin's first, at least part of a season covering the NBA, because he's just like, God, there are so many games. And I'm like, he just sounds exactly like a NBA rookie who comes from college and is like, there's more than 20 games. This is insane. It's just every other day. It's constant and never stops. Incredible front row seat. Kevin, if you had the number 1 pick and if you were picking for the NBA, who would your pick be?
A.J. DeBonza would be my pick. And I probably would not have said that in January. I had a very different perspective when BYU played Kansas in Allen, and Darren Peterson only played 20 minutes in that game, but I thought he outplayed AJ for pretty much the whole time and built Kansas such a lead in the first half that BYU even couldn't come back even when he wasn't playing. But I think ever since the Richie Saunders injury, where we've seen Kevin Young basically just turn over the entire offense to AJ and say, take as far as you possibly can, he's been fantastic. He's scored at will. He's had 35-point games to 40-point games. And I thought defensively he's also taken a little bit of a step up, which is what, Kevin Young talked about him as almost like a Paul George type defender, which I always thought was, ambitious, but at the same time, and hasn't always looked that way. But when he's going up against Iowa State and Momcilovic, they're probably the best shooter in college basketball right now. He limits him to 1 of 5. So it's clearly there. It's in there somewhere, right? But I just think he's been the best player with the probably all the NBA type of characteristics that you want, with the size and the mid-range game. The one thing that I would say gives me a little concern is he's not a very good 3-point shooter at the moment. Him going 1 of 7 from 3 in the NCAA tournament is really not shocking, which I think is maybe not what you want. But Kevin Young's guys and BYU guys, the last year, Jaguar was a terrible 3-point shooter last year and became a great 3-point shooter in the NBA this year. So I don't know, maybe that can work. He's young, and obviously people get better at shooting as they get more comfortable in the NBA. So, but I go with AJ, but I've also seen AJ probably the most out of everybody in this draft because I've seen Darren Peterson. I haven't seen him in person. I haven't saw Darius Acuff twice this weekend, but and Caleb Wilson like once when he came to BYU. But I'd pick AJ.
Is Darius Acuff 6'3"?
He does look 6'3" to me.
There's no way. There's no way. I refuse.
He's very explosive, very, very good athlete. I'm curious to see how he looks in the Sweet 16 though, because it wasn't like he didn't play like the highest caliber of athletes this weekend with kind of the draw that they had with Hawaii and High Point, but he was very good. He was very good.
I cannot wait for the NBA Combine measurements. I'm May 10th. The week of May 10th is marked on my calendar. If for nothing else, and I know that the NBA lottery is that week, so that's pretty important. But if for nothing else, then to find out how tall Darius Acuff is.
We're on Darius Acuff height watch, I guess.
Yes, we are.
And speaking of that lottery, we mentioned several prospects there, including one Darius Acuff. For a lot of the lead up to this NBA draft lottery, it's been talked about as kind of like the top 3 or 4 and then everyone else. Is that how you see this draft, or do you think there is a good chance of getting I'm not going to say like a franchise piece, but a difference maker at least, let's say in the top 10 or so? How deep do you see the lottery part of this draft? Because as we know, while the Jazz can tank their way into keeping their pick, they have no control over whether that is a number 1 pick, number 3 pick, a number 5 pick. And we saw last year how that sometimes rolls with those lottery balls. How deep do you see this in the top 10 or so?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a draft expert, but for a long time, like I've definitely felt like the top Caleb Wilson, Boozer, DeBonza, Peterson, now Acuff, like those are the main guys that you would see as like those are the guys that can really change your entire franchise. And I don't know, I'm not like I'm not watching film out of every single one of these guys or anything like that, from 5 to 10. So I don't really know, but also there's always a chance. Like I'm not an NBA expert at all. Like Sarah's definitely probably better equipped to answer this question. But to me, like I don't know, anything can happen in the draft where a guy falls. Ace Bailey, maybe he was seen as a top 3 guy. The Jazz get the 5th pick, or they're not even in where they wanted to be in the top 3, and he falls to them, and he's been very good of late. So I don't think it's like an impossible situation if they don't get a top 4 pick or a top 5 pick, that the Jazz are just kind of wasting away and they don't have a guy there. But for me, though, that top 5 is very, very good, and I think could help the Jazz. Any one of those 5 could help the Jazz, and then after that, I think it's a little bit more up in the air in terms of the type of player that you get immediately and be able to impact winning for a team that's trying to win next year.
Kevin's not a sicko yet. We'll get him.
Not yet.
We'll get him watching draft tape into the wee hours of the night at some point.
Not at the moment. Not at the. I have to. Give me a few years. I gotta maintain my sanity for a little bit.
Yeah, you've got some homework for your next appearance here on the Drive. One of those is choosing a walk-up song, and the other is diving into the NBA draft lottery because, hey, in a matter of just a couple weeks, we're not going to be talking about Jazz basketball. We're going to be talking about their draft positioning, and we'll know what that may be. So, we'll get to all that by the next time you join the program, Kev.
Absolutely. I'll be on it. That'll be my homework assignment for the next couple of weeks.
Give folks an idea of what they can expect from the newest Jazz beat writer in the coming months. Maybe don't have as much content as you would hope because you're still kind of easing into that position, but let folks know where they can find you, what they can expect, and what you hope to bring to the beat.
Yeah. Obviously you can find it at the Salt Lake Tribune website, and it's kind of, I don't tweet very much, not a big Twitter guy, but at the same time, try to tweet out an article here and there. But at the same time, like for me, like the way I approach this job, and I've always thought about this job is like, what what connects the Jazz, what connects an NBA organization to, or really any team you're covering, to the community that they're in and the people that, care about these teams. And like for me, I grew up a Rutgers fan with my dad, and like that was kind of our connection. A lot of the time was reading stuff and talking about, mostly him probably for most of it, of like him reading stuff and telling me about different things going on in the program, often not good with Rutgers, but that was just the reality. But it, and I kind of look at it the same way, of like trying to pull out the things that I think could be connection points. It doesn't always have to be about, the X's and O's, but it's about, it can be anything. Like, what is the story of the day? Like, if that's a Oscar Shibwe, writing books one day, like if that's the thing, or the next day it's like a public records thing, or, obviously at BYU, it can be anything from talking about Clark Gilbert and his views on NIL and how that impacts, AJ DeBonza and the recruiting world, or, a criminal case in one scenario, or something way more light. And so that's kind of how I look at it, and try to bring to the NBA, but definitely still a learning curve for me personally. I've just never been around the NBA. So I'm trying to find those things myself, and then pass it along to our readers as I figure out what I'm doing too.
We love it, and look forward to watching you in that role. And we'll get you on the show here regularly as you do so. Thanks, Kev.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Kevin Reynolds of the Salt Lake Tribune. You can find him, as he mentioned, at Kevin Reynolds 30 on his social media, on Twitter there specifically. Like a lot of folks in the business, not on there as much, but it's still kind of where sports news is breaking. So we'll point you in that direction. Good stuff, Sarah. I think he's going to add a good piece to your guys' beat.
I cannot wait for his walk-up music next time, which is just silence.
You just don't play anything. And listen, beat writing in the NBA is kind of an interesting thing right now. As we've talked about, the local stuff is kind of struggled. The local TV markets, a lot of them don't exist anymore. But there's still a huge need and a huge place for local beat writers. I think now, as much as ever, it's just kind of a tough lane to try to find when the NBA is kind of going global, is kind of going corporate, but you still have a local angle and a local lens, if that makes sense.
There are so many NBA markets where the numbers of writers, reporters, whether that be in print or on television, radio, what have you, it's dwindling all around. And so, I mean, Jazz fans, I know that a lot of the Jazz beat writers, like those numbers have dwindled in the past few years, but it's still a lucky place to be a fan of an NBA team, because you still have at least, two major outlets with the Deseret News and the Salt Lake Tribune that have full-time beat writers covering the NBA. It's just that's still lucky. So it's a good place to be.
Should we just call Andy right now, see if he answers?
No, thank you.
We'll adjust as Andy moves into the non-sports world. It'll be interesting, of course. A lot of changes in the Jazz beat room over the last couple of years. Kevin Reynolds, by the way, brought to you by our friends at IFA Country Stores. IFA Step 1 crabgrass preventer and lawn food gives your turf a strong start for months of thick emerald grass that will leave your neighbors green with envy. It provides a fast green up and helps your grass build up the energy it needs for the summer, and it defends against weeds. Only at IFA and IFA.co-op. Back on the other side, talking some more NBA hoops. Tim McMahon for your NBA Daily Assist, one of our favorite weekly guests here on the program. Tim joins the show on the other side. Still to come, some Utah football sound from this morning up on the hill. Ben Golliver talking some hoops. Then we'll turn it over to today's best. You'll hear from OC earlier in the day, talking with Adrian Denny and more right here on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. NBA daily assist time on the drive. No Spence Checketts today. I am Porter Larson, usual producer of this here program. That is Sarah Todd sitting across from me, the two-time sports writer of the year here in the state of Utah. And if he was here in Utah, maybe a competitor for that award, Tim Hollywood McMahon joins us from Los Angeles on this Wednesday afternoon. T-Mac, how are you, my friend?
Howdy, partners. How are you?
Doing well. We were asking our previous guest about his potential intro song, his walk-up song. Sarah, how do you feel about Tim McMahon's own, the Drive-specific branded Band McMahon intro song?
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. To have the kind of clout that you need in order to have your own intro song, we all bow down, Tim.
Listen, some of us are just special, and I'm fortunate to be among those.
I'm not built different. I'm not built Ford tough. I'm built pretty normal. So
it's a good life.
Tim, we opened this day in NBA news with approved talks, approved looks into expansion in the NBA. We know the deal here. We know what's going to happen. We know it's coming down the road, and we know it's going to be Seattle and Las Vegas. But now that we've seen at least something official from the association, how are you ingesting the potential expansion into those two markets?
Yeah, and the surprise would have been if it wasn't approved for them to, quote unquote, explore this. Which by explore they mean, inviting groups to get their bids together, and it's just a simple math/business thing. For these owners around the league, they're going to be able to get bids probably in the $7 to $10 billion range. That makes a lot of sense for these owners, to give up a little slice of future TV deals, and they just signed one that's obviously an 11-year deal, to get that kind of influx of cash right now. Makes a lot of sense. We all knew it was going to be Vegas and Seattle, and kind of the other little side thing here. This doesn't impact the Jazz because the geography didn't work for the Jazz, but you'll have franchises, Minnesota, Memphis, New Orleans, trying to make the case, well, hey, somebody's got to move east. It should be us.
I'm interested in that, it's kind of been already whittled down to at least those three teams, and it's going to be at least, two of them or one or two of those teams to be the one to move east. And I'd have to imagine, right, that those teams are looking at the West and they're like, yeah, please pick me. We will go willingly.
Yeah, so we'll see how competitive the bidding process is. There's only so many people or groups in the world that can come up with $7 to $10 billion. I assure you it will be competitive to for those franchises making the case that they should be the ones moving east, for the simple fact that the path to the finals through the East is a lot easier than the path through the West, and that's now, and it doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon. When you look at Oklahoma City with an MVP just entering his prime, San Antonio with an MVP candidate who was years away from even hitting his prime, much less all the pieces around both of those guys. The Lakers are always going to be a force to be reckoned with, and on down the list. So yes, I can guarantee you that there will be some aggressive lobbying to be the franchise chosen to move conferences.
One thing that could actually impact the Jazz and every other team across the league when you're talking about expansion is how they actually deal with the expansion draft and how these other teams are going to fill out once it comes time to actually do that. Do you have any sort of sense that this might follow kind of the same system that we saw back in 2004 with Charlotte, that teams will be able to protect a certain number of players, and will they kind of go along the same formula?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be the exact same formula, but it will certainly be similar. Listen, the Utah Jazz are not going to have any risk of losing, for example, Ace Bailey in an expansion draft, right? I don't know the exact number of players that they'll be allowed to protect, but it'll be, there might be some tough decisions to make, but you won't be making those decisions based on guys that you see, as part of your long-term foundation. The decisions, I don't know if it'll be, can you protect 7 guys, 8 guys, 9 guys, whatever it is. My point is no one's losing anyone that they consider a long-term foundation piece in an expansion draft.
Maybe this is not necessarily tying these two questions together, but it's another NBA big picture question. The salary cap is going down for the first time in quite some time, and a lot of that is, kind of said to be about local markets, local TV affiliates not existing as they once did before. Were you surprised to see the NBA salary cap go down, or is that something you thought was a possibility with the direction of the NBA right now?
Well, to be clear, the salary cap's not going down. It's just not going up quite as much as anticipated. What you saw there was the cap number is going to come in $1 million under projections. So
right.
There's still the cap is still increasing, and it's still increasing significantly. It's just $1 million less than anticipated. And that's, listen, the league has some major issues to figure out. Obviously, tanking is at the top of the list. I would say right below that should be the local television issues, and this is, it's the regional sports stations. A lot of those are, going belly up, or, it should not be hard for an NBA fan to watch their local team. It shouldn't. And I'll give you an example. Like, I'm here in LA right now, and the Lakers are playing the Pistons the other night. I can't watch in my hotel room. You don't get Spectrum in the hotel room. I don't subscribe to Spectrum. Hell, I don't live here. I have League Pass. I don't need Spectrum except for when I'm here. And then, so I had to go. I'm watching games in the room, and it's a close game going in the fourth quarter. I had to go find a bar, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And admittedly, I tend to find those on a frequent basis regardless. But I had to go find a bar showing the game to be able to watch the fourth quarter of a good NBA game featuring the local team. It shouldn't be hard to watch local teams play, and that's an issue the league needs to figure out. I think personally, it's not that complicated. If a fan is willing to give you money because they like basketball so much, they want League Pass, I think the local game should be included in that.
I'm looking here at kind of comments that Adam Silver made today, and one of the things that I'm looking at Mark Stein's tweet. He said that Commissioner Adam Silver on the 65-game rule, quote, "I think it's working." That seems kind of antithetical to what everyone else has thought about the 65-game rule. Am I right, Tim?
Well, what he's saying is load management's not the massive issue that it was before they put the 65-game rule in, that you don't have stars sitting to sit. Stars sitting because, because they don't want or franchises don't want their stars to play. And so it's working in terms of, like, stars are motivated to play. It's not a coincidence Nikola Jokic came back with one game of wiggle room when he had his knee injury. It's not a coincidence. Like, I can assure you, the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama know exactly how many games he can miss to still be eligible for MVP and Defensive Player of the Year and other awards. So it is working in the sense that stars are playing more than they were before. Now, the Cade Cunningham case, the intent of the rule wasn't to punish a guy like Cade Cunningham, who clearly is deserving of all NBA honors, but has a significant injury after he'd already proven himself as an all NBA candidate this year. Not just candidate, the question was first or second team. There wasn't a question if he was going to be all NBA. This wasn't the intent of the rule. I don't know how to make that rule perfect, though. I just don't. The good news is Cade qualified for Supermax last year, so it's not like this is costing him money. But clearly the intent of the rule is not to punish a guy who's diving on the floor in a late March game and is going to miss the rest of the regular season because of it, and just came up a little bit short of hitting the games limit. Attendant
to that, the NBA PA, I guess, kind of responded to this. It's an ongoing conversation with Giannis and the Bucks and ownership. And the NBA PA essentially said that the NBA has got problems on its hands until ownership is reined in. What does the Players Association mean by that?
I mean, listen, they're putting the Bucks on blast because the Bucks don't want Giannis playing right now, which is in the Bucks' best interest. Now, they threw the tanking stuff in there, which is smart by the Players Association, because tanking is such a hot button issue right now. Giannis sitting is not about tanking, okay? It's a disingenuous use of a hot button issue, and it worked. But let me just explain something to you. The Bucks stink with Giannis, okay? They've lost 9 of the last 12 games with Giannis. The Bucks will stink no matter what moving forward because they have a bad roster and because they've exhausted pretty much every possible pathway to trying to build that roster. Now, and also tanking, it's too late for the Bucks to tank. They at most could move one spot. I think as of this morning they were tied with the Bulls for ninth or 10th. They're not going the rest of the season for that. So there's a conversation to be had. You can debate: are the Bucks within their rights to shut Giannis down for the season because there's legitimate concern of him suffering a catastrophic injury. He's had repeated calf strains. We know what's at risk for a guy who's had repeated calf strains. If he has a catastrophic injury, he has no trade value. They need to trade him this summer. It's reached that point. They needed to trade him at the deadline or last summer, but whatever. Do they have the right to protect the trade value of a max player? You can debate that, but don't tell me this is about the Bucks trying to tank. That doesn't make sense when you look at the facts of the matter.
Well, and the Bucks don't even, if I think I'm correct in saying this, they don't even have their own pick. So even if they were to tank,
they do. It's this weird thing where they have the worst of their pick and the Pelicans pick, and then the Hawks somehow got the best of those two picks because the New Orleans Pelicans front office is a complete cluster.
Great stuff by them. I think it's interesting, the 65 game rule stuff. This has been on my mind a lot lately because, even if Keontae George was not in line to win Most Improved Player, he certainly would have gotten at least some second or third place votes from people. And I think that those votes are meaningful for these players. Even if they don't win, being in the conversation means something to them. And so I think that what I worry about is that obviously the intent of the rule is to make sure that the stars are on the floor and that they're playing in those games, but that it does end up punishing players. And it's not just like the stars, right? It's not just that. It's the narrative of this NBA season that it has the potential to change. And we might end up with, a Shea MVP this year, and it was okay because it didn't end up actually hurting who is deserving of the MVP. But we got dangerously close this season to seeing that 65 game rule really change the narrative of what this season is.
Yeah, and listen, I think there's going to be conversation. Certainly the Players Association is forcing conversation, but I think there will be conversation within the league office, between the league office and the Players Association, and with the board of governors about maybe some tweaks to the 65 game rule. There is an exception written in there. I don't have the exact phrasing in front of me. It's like if you get to 62 games and have a season-ending injury, there's an exception. Cade, unfortunately, by the definition of this rule, is only at 60 games. He played 61, but one of those is only 4 minutes. Could there be something where there's if you hit a certain minutes threshold, that you get an exemption there? Cade's played over 2,000 minutes this season. I mean, he's the primary reason the Detroit Pistons are sitting in first place in the Eastern Conference, exceeding anybody's expectations for them this season. There's no debate on whether he's had an All-NBA caliber season, that he's contributed massively to the success of his franchise. So I could see some tweaks, but I don't see them just blowing the rule up altogether because, what Adam Silver is saying is the rule has addressed the issue that it was intended to address.
But then there's just some unintended consequences afterwards.
Exactly.
10 games left, at least for the team that plays here in Utah, Tim. Listen, knowing that they are going to continue to position for the NBA draft and knowing what their goals are to round out the season, what can we expect in the remainder? And your recent thoughts on one Ace Bailey, who appears to maybe be what the Jazz thought he is.
Well, I could say the number one thing you can expect is Ace Bailey to have the ball in his hands a lot and be given all the freedom in the world to spread his wings and to, get up a bunch of shots and experiment with his game and for them to run different actions for him, to put him in different situations. And, listen, I will warn that a late season shooting spree by a rookie for a tanking team does not guarantee future stardom, right? Like the last rookie to have 5 straight 30-point performances. Anybody want to guess? Jalen Green for the Rockets.
Okay.
Obviously, Jalen Green did not become a superstar for the Houston Rockets, but the Jazz very firmly believe that Ace has star potential. You can see his development throughout the course of the season. Sarah knows this. They're as excited about his potential and his ability on the defensive end as they are on the offensive end. And, it's okay to be excited about, potential development of a 19-year-old kid with that type of talent. Like, it's okay to get excited about that. I do think this kid's got a really bright future in the league. And, obviously the situation is not ideal, but there's nothing wrong with enjoying the developmental reps of a kid like Ace Bailey, especially when he's scoring whatever it was, 95 points over a 3-game span. Like, That's fun.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's at least one of the silver linings for the Jazz at the end of the 2025-2026 season. That is Tim McMahon at Band McMahon on Twitter, of course, on your television screens at ESPN and otherwise. The Hoop Collective, he's all over the place. Tim, we appreciate your time as always, and we'll chat again next week.
I appreciate it. Adios, amigos.
The NBA Daily Assist. That is one Tim McMahon, one of our favorites here on The Drive. We'll be back on the other side. Hey, how about some Utes talk? Utah football, their spring is well underway. On the other side, you're going to hear from Colton Swan, Kevin McGivern, the offensive and defensive coordinators for the Utes, and a few more guys. Utah football spring sound coming your way on the other side. It is The Drive today with myself, Porter Larson, and Sarah Todd filling in for Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back in the drive. No Spence Checketts today. I am Porter Larson. Sarah Todd along for the ride with me on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Coming in with some Mac Dre, Sarah.
Oh, man. I just love that I'm getting to Bay Area, to hyphy the drive with Spence Checketts right now. This is incredible.
Give us the intro. I'm just assuming the AM radio crowd in Utah may not be as familiar with this as our usual bumps.
No, they probably are not as familiar, but anybody from the Bay Area, I mean, they're the Mount Rushmore of Bay Area hip hop. Probably #1 on that would be Mac Dre.
Okay. Not who am I
Short,
thinking of?
E40,
Too Short.
They're on there too.
Okay, those are the two that would come to mind for me.
Yeah.
But I'll have to dive into some Mac Dre as well.
Yeah.
We will get back to some hoops talk. Of course, big thanks to Tim McMahon, Kevin Reynolds for joining the program. But it is your home of the Utes, and it is March. That means spring football. I spent the morning up on the hill on the campus of the University of Utah at the Spence and Cleone Eccles football facility, chatting with coordinators and assistant coaches from Utah football. And now we'll hear first from the offensive coordinator. He is one Kevin McGivern.
How has the offensive install been going so far this spring? And, what's kind of stood out to you about the personnel you have available here at Utah?
Yeah, I think the install is going pretty well. We had some opportunities for some meetings prior to spring, with our time allotment available, and we were able to go through a few things on the field within the restrictions. So we were able to meet about a lot of things, talk about a lot of things, give them some exposure. We're seeing it in practice for the first time, so we set it up so there's an install day, then a review day. So through practice 4, it was 2 installs with 2 reviews. Still a lot of details, a lot of things we have to clean up, which is normal. It's not frustrating. Just got to have a growth mindset and got to take it with a grain of salt with trying to create the chemistry with putting all 11 pieces together. But but I think there are some really good elements to personnel wise to this offense, some things that we're tinkering with right now, trying to find roles to see what situations we can put guys in and who we can use and create packages around, things like that. And so, but I'm excited about some of those parts.
I'm going to bring up Bryson just for a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, Bryson was a dual threat quarterback, very experienced in both passing and running. You have 2 quarterbacks that are good at both of those things. I'm curious, just, with your offense, what are you looking for from Devin and from Bird, and kind of piggybacking off of that, how different is this offense from maybe what they experienced last year?
Yeah, obviously, with Bryson, we tried to utilize his whole skill set. I think a big part of what we went through with him was developing him as a passer, but probably most importantly, developing him as a decision maker. You go back and watch it, everybody knows how athletic Devin and Bird are. And I know that that's something that we'll be able to lean on. That's not a secret with their athleticism, that you can utilize that. They can get you out of certain situations. It's always nice as a play caller, but developing the total quarterback, and I think the biggest thing with their development, probably with the system and schematics of the system, is just developing their decision making, developing their processes. Reads that a guy going from maybe where he's got an object receiver, it's like throw to this guy, and then all of a sudden you're going through a full field progression with certain concepts just because of what the system requires you to do, and have been really surprised with how well they picked that up, how fast, doing some really good things out there that are atypical for a 4th spring practice.
For years, Utah's used the run to establish everything it does with its offense. When you came in here, what was that conversation like with Scally? And what's your philosophy in coming together? Does he give you more leeway because you are the offensive guy to have the expertise and he doesn't? Or how does that all work together in building an offensive philosophy for this Utah team?
I think that the biggest directives from Coach Scally, I think first and foremost is there's been a culture established on defense. The Coach Scally's you go back to the RSNB with the defense, and making that a whole team culture. So that's something that we're really trying to dive into. How we play, what that culture is as a team, and to establish that same type of toughness, that same type of relentlessness on the offensive side of the ball. And outside of that, at this point, it hasn't really given me too many directives. Outside of who are your personnel, utilizing them the proper way. I think an important component of what it's been in the past is the ability to play complementary football. And, regardless of what it's looked like from year to year, my understanding of what this place is, what we've been able to lean on to be able to win football games, to win complementary football, things like that are, I'm well aware of those things, but that's never been a directive from coach, just more how we play and getting the best usage out of our personnel. And like I say, just, how can we best play complementary football to win football games?
So it's the old cliche that games are won in the trenches. You've got an interesting offensive line unit in the sense that you've got the 5-star freshman, you've got the transfer that's got a lot of experience, but he's coming up from the FCS level, and then you've got a group of guys that have been in the program for a while and lots of snaps, especially last year, given how they were backups, but maybe not a lot of starts between them. So what are you looking for from that offensive line? What's it going to take for guys to separate themselves and get into that starting 5 or the 10 deep rotation or whatever that looks like?
Yeah, first of all, I have to compliment Coach Gross and the job that he's doing with those guys. I've been very pleasantly surprised with the group. I was probably just as skeptical as you guys were coming in with yes, there were some starts, yes, there were some experience, but kind of spotty. Collectively as a group, no starts together. I think there's chemistry built there when you finalize that group and they start to play together, and there's that communication, there's that camaraderie that comes with it. I think we're ahead of schedule as far as those things go. Coach Gross is a technician, and I see those guys working on their craft every day. I see the room becoming closer, bonding. I'm seeing leadership come out of that room.
They do well, and where their areas of improvement are.
Yeah, I would say extremely important. Just as every place that I've been has been different, and part of that process is like with here last year, and I've said it before, they were very successful offensively here with a certain philosophy, and obviously leaning on the run game, was brought up, and something that they were masterful with, score 40 points a game, and you're moving the ball up and down the field. So, I would be remiss if I wasn't studying last year's offense, and especially the guys that were involved in it and what they knew, being able to implement those things with what we're doing systematically, and then, for me, it's like, okay, what are the best components of that we can implement? How can we build on it? And then figuring out how those pieces, those players fit, but there are some guys coming back that did some things in that system with, some of the backs with Wayshawn, with the way they use Daniel Bray. He's one I would love to be able to expand his role, see what he can do, because he's a really dynamic player. We talked about the quarterbacks with their involvement in the offense, but what that looks like, because I think, it's not really expanding their role, but it's kind of what you're asking them to do within the system. And, so it's like, how much more can we put on their plate? And that really boils down to how well they can make the decisions with it. And, expanding the pass game more so, or even expanding some schemes in the run game, or whether it be RPO schemes that they're not used to, even though they might be used to running something. There's a lot of different components of it, but I think the personnel surrounding those quarterbacks, the usage of those guys and the personnel surrounding them and the roles you put there. I mean, we got those 2 rhinos in there that I'm like, okay, I haven't really played with the rhino, but these guys are really cool. I just know that they're in there and they're knocking people around, and so, I've used a fullback in the past, but last year at Utah State, a lot of 2-back and 3-back, but they were backs with different skill sets, and so whether you call them a tight end or a fullback, but how do you utilize those guys to the fullest extent? It's a good problem to have. It's fun, but early in the process of trying to put that all together.
it's rare in the advent of the portal that you have two quarterbacks that, are starting caliber. But they went through a lot of changes offseason. I mean, they lost their quarterback coach, their offensive coordinator. In your shoes, when you're coming in, I'm sure you had to kind of put on your salesman hat. Just what were the conversations like with Bird and with Devin in that process of kind of the chaos of it all? Just, here's my system, here's why I want you guys to stay. What did that all look like from your perspective?
I think the biggest thing is I think guys like that are going to want to see somewhat of a track record, whether it's, being able to have, some success somewhere offensively, guys that you've developed. I think there's relationships that you make that, where they're hearing from people and that had experience with myself or with Coach Gunderson. I think it's, I think a big thing with Devin was selling the development. And, this is what had guys do. These are similar players to you and what they've been able to accomplish. It's a goal of his to go to the NFL, and so it's okay. How do we need to develop you to get you to the next level? We need to get you more in tune with protection. We need to get you more in tune with certain types of reads, with certain types of concepts, so that you become more of a complete player. I think with Bird, it's utilization. How can you contribute, and what does that look like? He's like a Swiss Army knife, and without giving up the ship, there's a lot of different things that he can do on a play basis, and different places that he can line up, and we need to be able to utilize those and get creative with those packages.
You bring Braden Pagan with you from Utah State to Utah. Just speak to the importance of having him, help bring the other guys along, whether it is in the wide receiver room, the running backs, quarterbacks, wherever it is, and just what does he, add to this offense? Yeah,
I think first and foremost, the experience with the system and some of the schemes. I think being a second year in that, they're doing things a little bit faster, a little bit more confident with what you're doing, and I think that's important for Braden especially when you're going up a level. Because I think if he was where he was at last year with what he's competing against at this level, you want to have some confidence in what you're doing, and so he's been able to be out there practicing at a high level because he's confident in the system. And then I think this early on, I think part of him being voted the leader on our team was the fact that he's been able to bring guys along. He can sit in the receiver room and he can coach those guys up on what certain things need to look like and what this concept means. Okay, well, this is what Coach McGibbon wants on this concept, and so it's been extremely valuable for the room, but then also the experience in the system. I think valuable in his confidence and the speed he's playing with right now.
Thank you, Coach.
That was Kevin McGibbon, Utah's newest offensive coordinator. A winding path to get to the University of Utah, but in some ways it did start here in the state. He grew up, although being born in Santa Clara, he grew up in Orem, went to Mountain View High School, and then was trying to find a place to play some college football, wound up at Eastern Arizona, and then in 1996, a familiar name, Gary Croton, recruited him to play at Louisiana Tech. That is where Kevin McGibbon graduated and started his coaching career as a student assistant. He then went to Mountain View High School again to coach some wide receivers and tight ends. Got a job at BYU with Gary Croton as the GA. Went to Southern Utah, Weber State, Utah State. So he's literally been all over the Beehive State in different coaching roles. Took a stop at Memphis, a stop at Montana State, back to Utah State as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, some time in the Pac-12 at Oregon State for a couple of years, and then most recently, of course, San Jose State, and then last year as the offensive coordinator and QB coach at Utah State University. Now, the newest offensive coordinator for the University of Utah, a position that has kind of been a little bit of a carousel for the Utes, of course, under Kyle Whittingham. Well, we're going to see how that goes in the Morgan Scalley era with one Kevin McGibbon. Now, switching to the other side of the football, we're introduced to Utes' former linebacker coach. Well, he's actually still the linebacker coach, but he's now taking over play calling duties on the defensive side of the football. Here is Colton Swan.
You've been a defensive coordinator before, you know how to do the job, but I'd be curious what you kind of learned from Morgan and what you've kind of taken from watching him as defensive coordinator for so many years here at Utah.
That's a good question. Yeah, he's one of the best in the country to do it, and there was a lot to learn from him. Work ethic is probably one of them, and just his meticulous way about handling his day-to-day business. He spent an enormous amount of time studying film. There wasn't a stone that was left unturned when it come to his study habits and things of that nature. So that's probably one of the biggest things is just, having an answer for everything. Being able to problem solve different things offenses are going to throw at you, and being able to adapt and adjust and playing that kind of mind game with the offensive coordinator. They're, from an offensive standpoint, they're looking at you and trying to expose your weaknesses and get number counts and things of that nature. And so always being able to adjust and adapt, and even be able to do it on the run within the game, within the 60 minutes, and it's kind of that chess match as you talk. So yeah, that's a lot of what I learned from him.
You mentioned that chess match. There's a uniqueness with Morgan's defenses that sometimes that is coming in last second, last minute. How does that compare to other defenses you've been involved in? You've been the coordinator for another school, and what is the challenge of probably the expectation that kind of continue?
Yeah, I think, the uniqueness of that is awesome. The ability to adapt and adjust on the move, and that can throw offenses off. But at the same time, knowing your personnel and how your defense works, giving them consistency is really big. I think that players can really know and understand what they're trying to get done and execute at a very high level. Sometimes when you're throwing them stuff like that last second, the ability to execute at a high level, may be lacking a little bit, and you kind of go into hey, I'm gonna try to trick the offense or trick the quarterback or trick the offensive coordinator, and you end up tricking yourself. And so it's a fine line. It's a catch-22, and so you just, as a coordinator, you got to have the mindset of, okay, this is what we do really well, and let's go out there and make sure that we have answers for everything that the offense does to it, okay? So yeah, as a defensive coordinator, you want to have answers for everything, so that's kind of the biggest thing.
A lot of teams can only go as far as their on-the-field leadership can take them. Who are your leaders on this defense right now, and what are your expectations of them?
Yeah, we got great leadership. That's one thing then, transpiring from year to year that, you expect kids to do. That's one thing as us as coaches are taking an enormous amount of time is teaching and coaching them how to be great leaders, and, working them into it, forcing them to build that kind of culture within the defense. We've seen some great leadership, taking place from a number of guys on our defense, and we voted for a leadership council, and it's been posted to guys there. But one thing that I stress to the defensive guys is just because your peer, your buddy, or whatever didn't vote, or your name was not called when it comes to leadership, does not mean that you're not a leader. We've got a lot of players on this defense that played an enormous amount of reps that didn't stand up when the leadership council was called, right? And I need to hear voices from everybody, right? And that's one thing that we try to really stress defensively. It's not a one-man job. It's not a three-person job. It's us as an entire defense. We're going to put you in coaches in stressful situations, and we need to see the leadership really start to grow and build each other up, and hear that positive influence amongst the kids, and have that kind of just permeate throughout our defense.
Coach, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Cyrus Polu going into his second year. What are some of the early expectations for him through the offseason?
He's doing a really good job. He's in a dogfight, a very competitive room with a lot of really good players, and he knows that I will say that he is putting himself in a very good position to be successful. I mean, he knows he's got an opportunity to compete for a job, and he's taken full advantage of it for sure.
Colton, you've been here a long time, not to make you feel old, but you've been here a long time. You've seen Morgan as defensive coordinator. I'm curious, Is there any differences that you've seen from him as head coach that he's either adapted to, or is it just the same guy Morgan is?
Man, I've been here for a long time. It feels like yesterday I just got here. That's crazy to hear that. But
made me feel
yeah, he's a lot of the same personality, the same mindset, those types of things. Obviously, he's looking at everything from a 30,000-foot perspective and trying to oversee, a bunch of different facets. But a lot of the same type of personality, a lot of the same type of decision making, those types of things. A lot of energy, a lot of juice. I mean, he loves to tease and have fun, but at the same time, he loves to be competitive, and he loves, that side of things. So a lot of the same stuff you can see from a defensive standpoint, obviously carry over into, his head coaching mentality. So it's a lot of carryover.
Colt, many people saw you as kind of the natural fit to move into that DC role. I want you to kind of brag about yourself a little bit. What do you feel like makes you the right person to be the defensive coordinator, and kind of what's your philosophy, strategy to kind of be successful in that role?
It's hard I want to always try to be humble. So I think a lot of the attributes with even how I was raised and brought up, I like to be very meticulous. I like to be on top of everything that I do and have answers for it. Being a linebacker and a linebacker coach, you got to be involved in the run game, you got to be involved in the pass game, so you have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the entire field. And so it's just been something that I've set forth for myself as goals to see myself work into that role. And luckily and thankfully, Coach Scally saw the same in me, and so I'm excited for this opportunity.
Kind of building off that one, especially with the run defense, you guys kind of revamped that defensive tackle room this offseason. As also the linebackers coach, how have you seen, maybe progress happen with the big guys up front that can make it easier for your guys in your room? Yeah,
that's been a position group that, needs to reestablish its identity for sure. And thus far, they're doing so. It's a great group. The work ethic is through the roof. We got a bunch of guys in there that are competing for starting spots and that, are trying to get on the field. And we're seeing that. Obviously, as you mentioned, the better D-tackle play, the better it is for our linebackers. I mean, in a roundabout way, a linebacker is a defensive tackle just from an off-ball position, right? And so the more dominant and occupying they are up front, the better we are. And it's been good. The D-tackle's been doing a very nice job, and it will continue to do that. They're growing every day. The one thing that you do see from them is really good technique. It's a very technical spot to play, and you see a lot of really good effort by them. So really happy and for that position group.
Building on top of those two questions.
Man, we're going right up this ladder. Here
we go. You're going from a position coach where you're focused on your specific group at linebacker to now defensive coordinator, where you have to have a much wider view and perspective of things. How has that process been adjusting to that for you?
Man, that has been something where I've had to really kind of train myself in the last little bit to kind of expand my vision a little bit. As a position coach, you're worried about, 10 guys. You're working about 3 guys on the field, 2 guys on the field. You're handling academics for a certain part of the defense and not the whole entire defense. You're, just seeing things from ground level, not that 30,000 view that we talked about with Coach Scally. And so it's very interesting to kind of have that perspective. It's something that you definitely have to train to it, because you are sitting there thinking, okay, what is this corner doing, and what's that nickel doing, and what that safety doing? You're like, oh, by the way, your linebacker missed his gap, or whatever. And so you've got to have you got to be able to train your eyes to look where they're supposed to look at the correct time, or see what you're supposed to see at the correct time. And so it's tough, but with reps and training and things like that, film study, it's coming along.
That is Utah's newest defensive coordinator, Colton Swan. I got a little soft spot for Colton Swan. He's a local guy. Grew up a little bit in Jerome, Idaho, but he's a rural Utah fella. Spent a good share of his offseason team roping and bulldogging. Sarah Todd, which you're an expert in.
Yeah, obviously, bulldogging is my forte. I'm wondering, Porter. Obviously, I'm not the most versed in college football, and I'm not completely up to date on all of the ins and outs of Utes football. But what I'm interested in knowing, because we're talking, to the offensive and defensive coordinators. When Whittingham left, he takes Beck with him, right?
Right.
And how much does that actually kind of, I guess, throw the program into turmoil? Like, was there a lot of questions about who was actually going to move around, like what the carousel was going to look like within Scaly's system?
Yeah, I think with the timing of it all, there definitely were a lot of questions. Part of the reason that Morgan Scally brought in Kevin McGivern is because he feels there's quite a bit of continuity there. It's a similar system. It's not the same. Jason Beck has a pretty unique style with his play calling, with his offensive design. But a lot of the terminology, a lot of the stuff that you saw with Jason Beck is going to be similar with one Kevin McGivern. And that was part of not only trying to make it an easy transition, but that was also part of trying to retain your players, trying to retain Devin Dampier and Bird Ficklin, guys who had grown comfortable and liked that offense and like what Jason Beck was doing. There was a little bit of a re-recruiting process that happened when they announced that hire. So, yeah, there were a lot of questions, and it definitely was up in the air when you're making that transition, but that was also part of why they brought in these particular guys. Continuity, it's something Utah's had for a long, long time. They don't get the privilege of having continuity this year, obviously with the upheaval and the change for Witt going to Ann Arbor, but they were at least trying to keep some semblance of that with the hires that they made.
Yeah, it's such an interesting wrinkle in all of that, right? Like, I know that there's a lot that's been made recently with the documents that came out and the information about Witt leaving and kind of the steps that led towards that. But I think that probably that stuff happens, right? Like, I think that aside from him having been here for so long and maybe the timing, that does happen in college sports.
Yeah.
But how they adapt and how they work around it and how they're trying to, like you said, keep recruiting and keep the players in place that they already had when there is that upheaval, that's such an interesting wrinkle in all of that.
Yeah, the novelty of this situation is not a novelty elsewhere, right? Here in Utah, you've had the same coach, Sarah. Kyle took his first job at the University of Utah within a couple of months of me being born.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're not used to it. Yeah. You think, oh, hey, just another year, we're reloading Camp Kyle, here we go.
Right.
And to change that, it's a tough adjustment, but it's one that's really not that uncommon around college sports. The emails that we got, the documents that you mentioned are interesting. They're for this market, it feels crazy. It feels like drama. That was a run-of-the-mill back and forth between an agent and an executive. Right. It really was. And I think the timing of it, trying to replace your coaching staff, trying to replace a bunch of guys that are now going to Ann Arbor in January and February, now we're here in March with that staff pretty solidified, that's where it's tough. And not necessarily expecting it is where it's tough, when a lot of times at the Division I level, you kind of know when your coach moves on or when he's going to take a job or when he's going to step down. That's not the case here at the University of Utah. So it's been pretty interesting, but that's where we sit. And now it is the Scally era. No spring game this year for Utah football, but as you just heard, they're allowing us to see a little bit of the spring practices, and as you just heard from Colton Swan and Kevin McGivern, giving us some time with the coaching staff as well. If you missed any of that, you want to hear any of that or more sound, Sharif Shaw, Derek Odom, Mark Atuaya, all those guys will be up and available for you in podcast form up on our pages as the day goes along. ESPN700sports.com as well. Back on the other side, Sarah, Todd, and I will get across to the 4 o'clock hour. Ben Golliver will stop by of the GOAT NBA pod, and we'll talk some more hoops, talk a little bit more football, maybe some RSL in the 4 o'clock hour before we turn it over to today's best right here on your home of the Utes since 1951. And currently, Utah's number one sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
I'm a varied woman.
I will say, as you guys may have heard a little bit earlier, we played some Mac Dre. Quite the U-turn to turn into some Marty Robbins. But while we played Mac Dre, Sarah actually mentioned Marty. And you will know if you listen to the show with any regularity. One of my favorites is one Marty Robbins. That one, The Red Hills of Utah, one of my favorite songs, of course. Explain. You go from Mac Dre to Marty Robbins. You say you're a varied woman. How much does that really go with the music stuff?
I mean, from Mac Dre to Marty Robbins, that is how varied I am. I mean, my dad is 87 years old.
Okay.
And he was a long-haul truck driver for 45 years. And so, Merle Haggard, Red Savine, Marty Robbins. My mom is also from Arkansas, and so there's some influence there. And then I grew up in California, so there's the influence there. My brother, 11 years older than me, that's where I get introductions to things like Megadeth, Metallica. So I just run the gambit. I'm all over the place. Like
you, my music taste is all over the place. I will say, like Marty, Willie Nelson, you mentioned Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, like that is my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. That being said, I have been the designated driver for my parents to many 80s hair metal shows.
Sure.
Rat or otherwise.
Yes.
Not really my cup of tea, but I could sing every song.
Yeah.
I listen to a little bit of hip hop. I would say my sports folk get me more involved in the know there. A lot of jazz. For me, it's more less about like any specific genre and more about like old school acoustic. Once you try to put a computer involved,
sure,
any sort of mixing, for me, it's not something that tickles my ears quite enough to really get into. So old jazz, really old classic rock. I love the Animals. I love Led Zeppelin. So I'm kind of all over the place as well. Jazz, some good jazz music is great for me. So I'm kind of all over the map as well. But that's our little Marty Robbins interruption there.
It's funny, you keep saying jazz, and I'm like, don't make me talk about them.
Oh, yeah, the Utah Jazz, who used to have a jazz band.
That's the thing. It is such a missed opportunity. I know that they have their guy Reginald on sax sometimes at the games. He should be on retainer always, and they should have a jazz band. Like, it's just a missed opportunity to not be playing jazz during opening introductions, to not have someone on the sax for almost every national anthem. If you're going to keep the name, lean into it and lean into it hard.
Yeah, they're, I'm trying to remember the name. Someone text in, please, 877-353-0700. There used to be a live jazz band rather than, all respect to DJ June or whoever may be the jazz DJ at the time. It just hits differently with a little bit of live music there. They used to have like their section in the arena as a high school jazz band would. And if you are using that namesake, do it. Just do it.
Memphis does it. Memphis, I mean, not for every game, I think, but for many, many games, they have blues bands come in and play during timeouts, during halftime, stuff like that. And everybody loves it. There's nobody in the arena that's like, this is horrible. It makes sense, and everybody loves it. I think before we move on, I would like to talk about tomorrow's NCAA games.
It is the Sweet 16 after all.
It is the Sweet 16 after all. For Jazz fans, the obvious and most interesting game tomorrow is going to be the Arizona-Arkansas. That's the 1-4 matchup. That does feature previously mentioned Darius Acuff Jr., who is projected to be a lottery pick. Frankly, I have a lot of trouble watching Darius Acuff because it fills my heart with turmoil. I love love watching him offensively. I mean, the guy shoots the ball at almost 45%. He's got beautiful touch around the rim. He's a great passer. Just overall, his offensive game is so incredibly beautiful. I love it. Love watching it.
I'm with you there.
He's an absolute traffic cone on defense.
That's what I was going to say. He's joyous to watch on offense, but
and I refuse.
I don't want to say Donovan Mitchell, but there's a little bit there.
No, Donovan at times tried on defense.
Yeah.
I cannot say the same for Darius Acuff Jr. And I refuse to believe that he's 6'3". And so I have trouble watching him in the sense that, like, the offense makes me believe that he should be a lottery pick. The defense and the height are Isaiah Collier.
Right.
And that is scary, especially if you're a team that's picking 8th. If you're a team like the Jazz, and that could be someone that's in the range that you're picking. The Jazz, too many times over the last few years, have picked guys who their skills aren't translating great to the NBA floor, or they seem like projects, or they seem like they're incredibly lacking on one side of the ball. And, like, I just think that the Jazz need some dogs.
Oof.
Real lack of dogs
You're
on
not
the Jazz
wrong.
roster.
You're not wrong. Yeah. And even if you do, say you draft an AJ DeBonsa, but say you do get one of the top 2 or 3 picks.
Sure.
There's still a hole in that roster, so much length, so much offensive talent, plenty of shot making, a lot of floor spacing. Who is going to, in a second round of an NBA playoff matchup, who is going to take the assignment of the other team's best defensive player? Who is going to guard Kate Cunningham? Who is going to guard, name any of the other talented wings in the NBA and guys that are offensively skilled?
Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic.
You could go on for quite some time with some of the young stars in this league right now. The Jazz still have a hole in that regard. And I wonder if you say you don't get 1, 2, or 3 in this draft, do you really zero in on a guy who, maybe he's a 3-and-D type prospect, but really more emphasis on the defensive side?
Yeah. I mean, I think that when you look at the Jazz's, front court as it projects to be next season, and this is what the caveat is, like, if they are able to re-sign Walker Kessler and that all goes smoothly, etc., you do have Walker Kessler and Jaren Jackson Jr., but through an 82-game season, they're not going to be sharing the court all of the time. And I think there's an idea that, well, you got those 2 guys back there, they're going to clean up a lot of mistakes. But here in Utah, we're uniquely familiar with what it looks like to have one of the best defensive front court players, and how cleaning up all of the mistakes is not a sustainable way to play basketball. We saw that for years with Rudy Gobert. You have to have some sort of point of attack defense, some perimeter defenders that are going to take away some of that workload. And I know that there's a lot of hope for Ace Bailey to become this sort of two-way player. Very, very scary for me to think that you're going in, with second-year Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, and Keontae George as your perimeter guys. And if you go down the line of the current makeup of the roster, just perimeter defense is really lacking.
And, it kind of echoes the last iteration of the Jazz that was really good, where, yeah, you had Rudy Gobert back there to clean a lot of stuff up, but was it ugly in front of him for a lot of times.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just not, that's not sustainable. And it's when you go up against some of the most elite offensive teams, once we're talking about postseason basketball, and that's the goal of all this, right, is to get to postseason basketball again. It's just not sustainable to bank on your big guy cleaning things up.
This is true. We'll chat with Ben Golliver about that and NBA at large on the other side. That is Sarah Todd. I am Porter Larson. We're staring at each other through the glass here. Brought to you by Advanced Windows. See what I did there?
Great.
It's the March Madness window special from Advanced Windows, $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more. If you don't have 10 windows to cover, well, they'll prorate you for the fewer that you have. Advanced Windows is celebrating 40 years in business, proudly serving Utah homeowners since 1986. This is a family-owned and operated company. Our friend Jake Weber, our friend and mayor of Sac Lake City, one Nate Orchard, they are owners and operators of the business, and I'll tell you what, they will get you taken care of. They will make sure you have the home court advantage you need with local manufacturing, local customer service. All of it happens right here in the Valley, and then they send it to your home. Installation, manufacturing, all of the above happens in one house. So they eliminate the middleman markups. It is Advanced Windows, advancedwindows.com, or give them a call today and get on the books. It's your sign to get on the books and replace now. Save on energy and your bills later on. 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100 and at advancedwindows.com. Ben Golliver stops by to talk some hoops. On the other side, it is Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Drive time continues. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. I am Porter Larson, Sarah Todd. We're filling in for Spence Checketts on this Wednesday. We'll be with you once again tomorrow. We spent the last segment talking about some music preferences and looking back on the former Utah Jazz in-arena band. I couldn't remember the name. Well, it was pretty simple, Sarah. They just were called the Jazz Band.
Great. Really original stuff.
Ben Golliver joins the program now of the GOAT NBA pod and several other offerings. We'll get to him and let him plug all of his products later on. When I say products, I just mean his content. He's not...
He's coming here to shill. He's a snake oil salesman.
No, none of that. Just his content there. Ben Golliver, any memories of the Utah Jazz in-arena jazz band? And also, is Merle Haggard an appropriate or acceptable intro for yourself?
I wouldn't say it's a normal intro, but I was rocking out, man. Just incredible line of commercials you guys were playing before that, and then the music, all of it, the jazz band. It's all new to me, but you've got me in the right mental space. I wish I was out there with you.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons I wanted to have Ben on today is obviously his NBA knowledge, his basketball knowledge, and all of his offerings, as you were saying, Porter. But first, I just want to give Ben some space because he is such a lover of Utah and of national parks and the natural beauty that the state has to offer. And so I just want to give him space to explain the origins of that and maybe his favorite parks.
Well, it's just the exact right antidote to Las Vegas Summer League. You know, you go out to Vegas Summer League for like 2 weeks in July, and I'm not a gambler, I'm not a smoker, I'm not a drinker. I'm basically the last person who would ever go to Vegas. But for years and years, I got stuck there every summer for quite a while. And I love the basketball. Everything else, you know, you can just kind of keep it. And so the first moment after the tournament ends, I'm just driving straight to Southern Utah for the national parks. And I think that nationally, you guys probably know better than anyone else, Utah a little bit underrated, sometimes little stereotypes people like to run with. And so I just became this evangelist for the parks. And I've heard from hundreds of people over the years that have gone to either Zion or Bryce or Arches just because I won't ever shut up about how awesome they are. And so it's one of my claims to fame. I'm very proud of it. I love nothing more than debating, you know, ranking the top 5 national parks in Utah, 1 to 5 with everybody I come across. And so hopefully that doesn't sound too boring to you guys, but that's, you know, it's one of my top hobbies.
I love it. I'm glad Sarah brought it up because that is like, I'm a sports guy during the day, during football season mainly, but my off seasons, Ben, are spent literally just wandering around the desert, wandering around the mountains. I do some survey work for the U.S. Geological Survey. So I literally spend as much time as I have away from radio is spent walking around Utah. Our crown jewel, I believe, is our public lands, whether it's national parks, whether it's just open state lands or federal lands that have been preserved. That's right down my alley. So what's a spot you haven't been to?
Well, let's do this. What's your number one park? I mean, if you have to pick, you know, gun to your head metaphorically of the 5, which is the best? So
I think it's hard because there's a spectrum here. I think Zion is tough to beat just based on what you actually see in front of you, the splendor of the valley, the hikes you can do there. For me, we talk underrated, as you said. Utah is. Capitol Reef might be as underrated as anything. Ooh. There's not a lot of amenities. There's not a big restaurant and hotel there, but boy, is it a spectacular one. Bryce Canyon, if you hit it during snowfall, is among the most beautiful places you will ever see on this planet. And narrowing it down to one might be tough for me. I'll give you this: it's not a national park, but it is my favorite place in the world. And a place that I grew up in. So I'm a little biased here. But if you haven't been to the Uinta Mountains, it's a national forest, but not a national park. You got to get it on your list.
Oh, that sounds awesome. No, I went to a place called Secret Lake one time. I don't think it's too far from Salt Lake.
Yep.
That was an awesome hike. So my answer to the question is Bryce. I think Zion is the quote unquote correct answer, like the best national park. Like if you only have to pick one, if you only have a chance to go to one, that's probably the one you have to go to. But I just think Bryce, it's so unbelievably underrated. Like, it kills me it's not a top 10 national park by visitors every year. Only about half as many people go to Bryce as go to Zion. What are all those people doing wrong with their lives? Like, it's a couple hours away. You could easily do the 2-for-1. If you're going to head to Zion, go to Bryce. I've never been in the winter, but I like to go there in the summer because it's at such high elevation. It's not too hot. Beautiful canyon views. I mean, it's definitely better than the Grand Canyon. I don't know. I can't get enough of it. And anytime people go, they always send me pictures, and I start frothing. You know, like, I get really, really excited even when I'm just looking at other people's pictures of the beauty out there. Capitol Reef, I love the deep cut, man. I think Canyonlands in its own way is kind of similar there too. Underrated, where, you know, people go to Arches and maybe don't really understand everything Canyonlands has to offer. But you can't go wrong with any of them. That's why I love that state so much.
The pleasant surprise of my day, talking national parks with Ben Golliver.
Ben,
I could do this for weeks.
Ben, you'll be very proud of me that I had me and my now husband. We went on a very big European honeymoon before the wedding. After the wedding, we got away for 3 days and we snuck down, and the choice that we made was to go to Bryce. So I thought that you would enjoy that.
Oh my God. How did you not send the photos? I'm going to have to hold it against your husband, because I know he probably took most of the pictures, if I'm guessing. But man, that sounds like a great time. Was it better than the actual wedding? Be honest.
No, you've come to the wrong place to have that discussion. Okay. Aside from national parks, I want to get your take on a few things, because I think that me and you probably differ on opinion. When it comes to the tanking topic, which obviously is a big touch point right now across the NBA, and also uniquely in Utah, also often discussed, I don't really think that the NBA has a tanking problem. The fact that Adam Silver is making such a big deal about, we're going to take care of this. I've taken a different tone with the owners and the GMs and in those meetings, and that we're going to fix this, full stop. I don't really think that it's that big of an issue. What are your thoughts?
Well, I hear where you're coming from. You could spin it this way and say the NBA doesn't have a tanking problem. It has a Federal Bureau of Investigations problem. That to me is what's spurring all of this, right? I mean, I think the NBA was very comfortable for a lot of years sweeping things under the rug and just letting some of the shenanigans go. Guys get shut down early because of injury. Guys get pulled out in the fourth quarter. Oh, it's just all kind of part of how we develop young players. Like, they come up with those cover stories, right? But when the FBI comes out and they're arresting Chauncey Billups because, he's shutting down Damian Lillard and allegedly telling, gamblers about it beforehand, or you've got the Orlando Magic involved, the Los Angeles Lakers involved, and suddenly every time there's anything weird down the stretch of the season, you start to worry, well, what are the motivations here? Are these teams actually doing what's in their own best interest? Are there bad actors who are kind of sneaking in with inside information? And I just think that probably scared the NBA league office straight. I'll be honest, if it was me, Adam Silver, and I woke up to headlines about Chauncey Billups getting arrested, I would be convening a whole panel about whatever was related to it to try to make sure it never happened again, right? Because it's horrible for business, and it's horrible for the integrity of the product, right? I mean, it's one thing if your referees aren't that great, and I think most fans will probably agree the NBA referees aren't that great. It's another, as people question the integrity around that. But it's another if you just don't know the games are on the up and up because maybe some gamblers are running that thing. I mean, that's how you really destroy a league from the inside out. So I think that's why you're seeing all this tough talk. I want to see him put up or shut up. I mean, it took him 8 years to get expansion. How long have we been waiting for that, right? It's finally starting to get some motion. So tell me what the plans are, Adam Silver. I want to hear the taking plans, and then we can guess if, at least assess to see if it's going to work. Until then, it just kind of feels like hot noise.
Yeah, and it's not a tanking issue as much as it's an incentive issue. It's you maybe have too much basketball during the regular season issue, and also, as you just mentioned, the backdrop of the NBA having all of these issues legally, perspective-wise, kind of all hitting at the same time. Yeah, you mentioned the gambling stuff, which I think the gambling stuff is encroaching on the tanking stuff more than we want to talk about, more than anyone with the league is wanting to talk about. That's really why you're going to have to put your foot down is because your gambling partners who you're in bed with are not happy that they don't know who is playing, who is not playing from night to night, right? I think that's a huge reason the Jazz got hit, because they were doing it in game and not doing it on the injury report. It's interesting, and you mentioned the ownership stuff. We saw the NBA PA come out with a statement yesterday that I think was a subtweet of the owners, essentially. And this is all happening while the LA Clippers and Steve Ballmer, the richest owner in sports, an owner whose net worth nearly equals the NBA's net worth, is paying guys under the table, allegedly paying guys under the table. And we have not seen any answer to that from the NBA. And I think it's leading to a lot of people kind of having a little bit of a distaste and maybe an apathy for the league right now. And I think that's a bigger issue than any of the tanking stuff.
Well, I hear you, man. Being here in Los Angeles, we're still waiting. We're waiting. It's been a while. The only thing I would say in the NBA's defense in terms of that investigation is I felt the same way when they were going after the Phoenix Suns owner. Do you remember where there was all sorts of crazy allegations about his behavior,
Yep.
Robert Sarver? And when they actually published their report, it was so it was just like open and shut. Like the details in there were so bad that as soon as they showed it to reporters, we tweeted it all out. It was like, boom, this guy was almost gone overnight, right? And so that is a good example of the NBA taking its time, doing its diligence, publishing a thorough report that actually led to action, right? And so I hope that's the standard for all these investigations. And I hope that, if there is a lot of evidence, not just maybe there's a smoking gun, maybe not, but hopefully they bring all of that to light, because I do think all basketball fans deserve to see it, just like they deserve to know what the Phoenix Suns owner was up to. Again, it goes back to the integrity of the league, and it goes back to the idea of when I was growing up, I was proud to be an NBA fan, right? I mean, you've got a lot of guys who are playing for their hometown team for 10, 15 years, obviously Stockton and Malone in your neck of the woods, something to rally around. It's part of the city's identity. Everybody's really excited. And I hear your frustration, from a lot of casual fans who are like, oh, maybe I don't care about it as much anymore. There's just so many sideshows. They don't play defense, all those kinds of complaints. It really feels like a lot of those have happened on Adam Silver's watch. And he's made everybody a lot of money, so that's why he's still the commissioner. But there's been a lot of trends within the NBA that I feel like they could improve.
What I'm worried about is the unintended consequences of any of the rules that are going to be implemented this offseason, right? Like we've talked about on this show today and have talked about it many times before, the unintended consequences of the 65 game rule, right? And if they start to implement any of these ideas that kind of have been floated recently to fix tanking, quote unquote, if you change protections on lottery picks when they go in trades so that they can only be top 4 or lottery, I don't see that as changing tanking. That just changes the value of trades, maybe in how many trades will happen, and people are still going to tank. If you change the date of when, the records are set and then the rest of it, I just think that changes when teams will tank. They'll tank earlier in the season than they would late. And so are there any of these proposed things that you see, like you want Adam Silver to put up or shut up? Are there fixes on the table that make sense that would actually change tanking?
So I think that the NBA has a bigger issue than tanking. I think the NBA's biggest issue right now is that it can't keep its star players healthy. It used to be 100%. A problem that guys who were healthy had to load, or they would load manage, and that was a problem. But what's happened is the game has gone too fast, and your co-host mentioned earlier, there's too many games, still too many back-to-backs, too much travel. The wear and tear on the body is too many three-point shots. It's just too much. You go down the list, basically every single star player has been hurt with a real injury at some point this season, and guys who used to be indestructible, Jokic, Giannis, even Shea missed some time this year. Guys who never miss time, nor would they ever want to miss time, are sidelined for weeks at a time with some of these injuries, right? It's very scary to me. And so what ends up happening is if you have too many injuries, you've got teams that can't compete, and they start doing the tanking game of what's really in our best interest? How should we kind of approach this thing, right? And that's where the shenanigans start from. the central problem is that, like, you got to either slow the game down or have fewer games so that the best players are on the court, and then those teams are trying to win basketball games. And if you do that, I think you'd have a lot fewer teams that are actually tanking. But to your point about the incentives, you're dead right. I mean, when they flattened the lottery odds so that, they were trying to discourage people from being really, really bad, like as bad as the process 76ers were, all they did was encourage more teams to tank because now, if 8 or 10 teams can talk themselves into the idea of this being their best approach, well, they might as well go for it, whereas maybe it used to be just 5 or 6 teams doing it. So that was an unintended consequence. I think all of the proposals that you laid out have some pretty clear flaws, but Adam Silver's talking so tough here. Maybe he's got some other ideas that we haven't heard yet. I look forward to finding out what they would be. One thing I do know, the play-in tournament is not motivating anybody to do anything, is it? I mean,
no.
In the Western Conference, you got a whole bunch of teams that are not even caring at all about that 10th seed. We saw the Dallas Mavericks a couple years ago get fined because they tanked out, of that situation, trying to build around Luka to get themselves a better lottery pick. And so they've had some other grand ideas in the recent past that they told us was going to fix everything that really didn't do a darn thing.
I think that's what it frustrates me as much as anything with the current state of the association is not that Adam Silver isn't trying anything. I like that. It's the fact that with all of these issues that we've talked about, the things he's focusing are on some gimmicky in-season tournament that only gets the players more money and changing the draft and stuff that doesn't solve any of the issues we're talking about. I think that's what's frustrating me about his tenure as much as anything. Ben, you did a great job on the inset highlighting the positives here in Utah, mainly our national parks and the starting 5, if you will, of those parks. Now, from an outside perspective, do the same for me with the Utah Jazz in 2025 and 2026. We know all about the issues. We know all about the tanking and the losses. Give us some positivity. Give us some silver linings on where this team sits right now and maybe what they have in front of them the next couple of years.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I feel like it's actually easier to make the positive case about the 26-27 Jazz maybe than it is this current version, right? I mean, I kind of like that they swung for it and went for it with Jaren Jackson Jr. I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a risk. What I'm seeing in terms of the current style of play is some of these, defensive-minded players, they're peaking a little bit earlier in their careers maybe than they used to in the past. We used to always talk about, like, the late 20s or early 30s as a guy's prime. And I think with some of these players, because of how athletic and versatile you have to be defensively these days, some of those guys are having their best years now in their mid-20s or even younger. So to me, the question is, like, Jaren, he came in with lots of hype, big-time lottery pick, defensive player of the year. He's the backline anchor for a team that's making the playoffs, and they feel like they have a real core there in Memphis. Can he get back and can he take his game up to even higher levels than he's done? It wasn't his fault. He was such an innocent bystander to all the nonsense with Ja Morant in Memphis where they can't even trade Ja, so they have to do, the worst thing that they would ever want to do and trade a fan-friendly guy who was about all the right things, super community-oriented, friendly guy to the local community and all that kind of stuff. They have to give him up because they can't even trade Ja. So I feel like that's a real win for Utah. I mean, it just kind of landed in your lap. He's an easy guy to fit with everybody. If you've got a small point guard who can't play defense, and I think you might have one of those, he's great behind that, right? If you've got a scoring forward who, wants to spend most of his, time and energy trying to get buckets, well, he's a great compliment for that guy too. He can score if you need him to, but he doesn't need to dominate the basketball. He's very good at oscillating or calibrating in terms of how, effective and how involved he is in the offense, which is exactly the kind of player that you need, I think, with the young core that's developing. Obviously, you've got some intriguing young prospects with Ace and then whoever you're going to be drafting this year as well. And what we've seen, too, in this parity era, it's not that hard to make big jumps in the standings. I mean, look at San Antonio, right? They were in the lottery last year. They might win the championship this year. You look at the Indiana Pacers, they won the Eastern Conference last year. They're in the finals, one game away from winning the title. This year, they're the worst team in the Eastern Conference, obviously because of that Halliburton injury. We're seeing a lot more elasticity in the standings because of the parity era. So I think if you make an investment in a player like Jaren, you hit a draft pick, you get some real growth from Ace Bailey and Keontae, like there's nothing stopping you from being a playoff team next year, right? I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the NBA. That's how they're trying to redesign it. And I know that's been a long time coming because these last couple of years have kind of been a slog.
Ben, as you are, a Western Conference elitist. And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about before we let you go is, word on expansion is happening today, and like the NBA approving that they're allowed to explore, which basically means that bids are going to start rolling in. And that means that at least one of these Western Conference teams is going to need to move east. And if it ends up being New Orleans or Memphis, I think in the short term, that just solidifies how horrible the Eastern Conference is. Like, I feel like in order for it to be good at all, it has to be Minnesota. Like, you have to put a good team over there because, God, the Eastern Conference, if you added New Orleans next year, is just even worse than it is now.
Yeah, I like where your head's at. Thankfully, it's been a little bit closer east to west this year in terms of like overall winning percentage than it's been at some other times in the past. But the downside to that is because I think a lot of it's just driven by injuries, right? Because there's more stars in the West. All the stars are getting injured. So the West doesn't look as dominant as it often looks. I understand the argument for Minnesota because everybody up there in the upper Midwest, my parents are from Michigan. They are all just like cousins, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, right. Minnesota. It's all like just different flavors of the same brand. And so I think there is some sense to having Minnesota in a division with like the Bucks, and some of the other upper Midwest teams and just kind of calling that good. It would be awesome to have a big-time superstar in Anthony Edwards in the Eastern Conference too, right? I mean, it feels like with Tatum being injured this year, wasn't there just such like a dearth of like national or global stars? Like Jalen Brunson, obviously a great player, moves the needle in New York. He's a legend in the five boroughs, but he's not the kind of guy I think people are necessarily tuning into every single night after night to want to watch play. So I think I'm with you. I mean, I guess geographically, map-wise, the one that makes sense to me would be Memphis. It just feels like they should be in the same division as Atlanta. Just like that's how my brain works. But I get the argument from a competitive play standpoint, and that should be what's most important. I mean, you want to have balance East and West. I think you should try to balance the schedule better as well. All these Western Conference teams have to play each other more often than they get to play the Eastern Conference teams. That skews all the records and the ratings and everything. There's a better version of the NBA that's a little bit more fair than the current version, and we'll see if they ever get there.
Ben, you're so right about, some of those national TV games this year where, in other seasons you get, this could be a finals preview, right? Like between the teams. And just like, there were so many nights on some of the nationally televised games where I was just like, well, I can tune out of this one. It doesn't really matter. It's not the preview that I've been promised. And I'd much rather watch. And everyone else was all interested all season long. I mean, when are the Nuggets going to play the Spurs? When are the Spurs going to play the Thunder? That's what everyone cares about. So, and maybe that's just Western Conference elitism talking through the mic right now.
Well, you got the four best stars right now are all in the West, and they're on the four best teams, right? That doesn't feel like a coincidence. You got Shea, you got Joker, you got Luka, you got Wemby. I mean, those are awesome players. None of them are American, which makes you sit up and wonder, like, what are we doing right now as a country? But they're all phenomenal players. They're all unique. They've all got some personality to them. And if they don't have personality, they're at least polarizing. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about from that quartet. So, to me, the Western Conference Finals for a lot of my career has been the real finals. Not every year, but, certainly you can go through year by year and kind of pick it out. That's when I start to sound like an SEC football fan, where they start chanting SEC, and they say the SEC title game is the real national championship. That's kind of how I feel about the Western Conference Finals.
The difference is the West just won it every year. Outside of LeBron, every once in a while, pulling an Eastern Conference team to the mountaintop, you're not wrong. So, Ben,
this used to be a proper country. This used to be a proper country.
Out here in Utah, we're okay with some Western elitism. We appreciate your time, Ben. I could talk national parks for hours, and maybe we'll do that next time we get you on. Appreciate it, man.
Sounds great. I just want to thank you guys for Kyle Whittingham too. I'm a Michigan football fan. I really appreciate that. That's a big upgrade from Sharon Moore, and I don't need to explain why. Have a great day.
Hey, and if you want to, before we set you loose, let folks know where you're at and where they can find your content.
Oh yeah, I'm at Ben Golliver on all the social media sites. Greatestofalltalk.com for the podcast.
Appreciate it, Ben. We'll chat soon. As he mentioned there, at Ben Golliver, that's Golliver on socials. Good stuff from him today. Thank you, Sarah, for setting that up. We'll maybe get him on the station and program down the road as well. On the other side, Sarah, Todd, and I will wrap things up for a Wednesday edition of The Drive. We'll let you know what's to come on the station and what's to come on a Thursday edition of the program with Sarah and I. All that and more still to come on a Wednesday on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. wrapping up a Wednesday edition of The Drive. A little too short for our friend Sarah Todd.
This is great. I just want to sing along to this instead of talking sports, but that's not going to work.
Final segment of the program as we set you loose for a Wednesday and preview the next show. Brought to you by IFA Country Stores. Any drive to the basket begins with the first step. On the court, it's the ultimate power move. IFA Step 1 Crabgrass Preventer in Lawn Food is the first choice to give your yard a healthy, thick green look you admire. The neighbors will be green with envy. Shop IFA online at ifa.coop or stop by one of their neighborhood stores today. A few hours down, Sarah. Not too bad, is it?
Not too bad. Hopefully everyone will tune back in tomorrow. Only one more day of me. That's all you have to put up with.
For now.
Tomorrow's an exciting day, though. Major League opening day. The game tonight doesn't count.
Right.
Sweet 16 games start. It's a great day tomorrow.
It is indeed. We will get to all of it on the show tomorrow. Paul Pugmire will stop by for our Uinta Golf leaderboard update. Howard Beck, one of the best writers in the association, will stop by the program. We'll have an installment of Sports Court, the latest legal stories in sports, and we'll go from there on a Thursday edition of the program. A big thank you to Sarah Todd, Ben Golliver, of course, our local guy, Kevin Reynolds, and one Tim McMahon for stopping by the program. If you missed anything, up and available on our podcast page a little bit later on. We'll be back tomorrow for a Thursday edition of The Drive right here on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.